You are listening to the Motherhood Unstressed podcast, and I'm your host, Liz Carlile. Happy Monday. Welcome to a new week, even though if you're like me, it doesn't really feel that way. I think if it weren't for this show, knowing that every Monday I release an interview with you, and then every Wednesday I release a meditation, if it weren't for that, I'm not quite sure what day I would think it was or what was going on. I'm definitely interested in finding out how you guys are, keeping your normal routines going, how you're staying motivated, how you're staying sane, despite everything that's been going on. So let me know at Motherhood Unstressed. And I've been loving to see, how you're listening to the show still. A lot of you aren't on your commutes anymore. I would say most of you aren't doing your morning commute. So I love seeing, you walking your dogs and listening to the show and just cleaning, because we're all doing that, I think, a lot more. So just touching base and showing me how you're listening to the show keeps me motivated to do it and to keep it going. But I'm so thrilled to share the work of my guest with you today. His name is Daniel DeBaun, and he is an internationally recognized expert in EMF radiation, EMF shielding, and EMF-related health issues, with a special focus on the effect of exposure from mobile devices such as laptops, tablets, and cell phones. And his main concern is regarding the health impact of EMF emissions. And it grew over 30 years of engineering experience in the telecommunications industry. So he knows his stuff, and he's held a variety of executive positions at SAIC, Telecordia, AT&T, and Bell Labs. And he's also the co-author of Radiation Nation, The Fallout of Modern Technology, which I read in about 2 days. I found it fascinating and really eye-opening. It reminded me of the old days where, doctors and everyone else thought smoking was fine. And even though there was research out there saying, this is not safe, this causes cancer, everyone just kind of didn't think about it and just believed, the mainstream media, that everything was safe. And so I think with the introduction of 5G and everything that's coming out now, we really need to be aware of this issue, of this problem, so that we can protect ourselves and, more importantly, protect our children, because this is an unprecedented situation of the amount of radiation that we're all being exposed to. And I feel like the world is just asleep about this issue. So I'm really excited to share this episode with you. If you love it, please share it with at least one friend. Please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. The reviews are coming in, I think, because you guys are all home and I'm loving it. So thank you so much for that. Tag us on your Instagram stories as always, and spread the word, because EMF is a serious, serious issue, and I can't stress that enough. I know we've got so many things to worry about and that are going on, but this is an issue that's not going away, and it's actually increasing, especially this next year as more 5G towers go up. So listen, share, and enjoy the episode with Daniel DeBaun. This episode is sponsored by Personal Revolution Podcast. Have you been stuck inside wondering how to take charge of your life? Is there something you want to do but haven't been able to do it yet? In Personal Revolution, best-selling author and life coach Allison Task helps you take control of your life with inspiration and humor so that you move from where you are now to where you want to be and have fun doing it. It's like having a personal coach whispering in your ear. This 3-month podcast course, along with bonus episodes each month, will help you create a clear vision for what you want out of life, remove the frustrating blocks that are holding you back, develop a detailed action plan that will drive you to where you want to be, and build the network that will help you create your future. The Personal Revolution podcast comes with a personal workbook and real-time access to a community of other changemakers working towards their goals with positivity, possibility, and momentum. And for a limited time, all of this is available to you for free. Download the Himalaya app in your app store, look up Personal Revolution, and enter the promo code REVOLUTION at checkout to get your first month absolutely free. If you're ready to go after a better life, you are ready for Personal Revolution. Well, hello, Daniel. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited that you're here to share your message with my audience in regards to EMF. So before we get into all of that, I'm curious, what was the spark that led you into studying and writing about EMF?
Well, thanks so much for inviting me, Liz. I really, really appreciate an opportunity to chat with your listening audience. It's really actually pretty funny how I got into this. I wrote standards, Bell system standards for the Bell Labs, and I used to run the technical laboratories that tested technology. that was being introduced to the Bell system. So I had lots and lots of background in electromagnetic radiation and electronics in general. 7-8 years ago, my wife said to my sons, I want grandchildren, and having a laptop on your lap can't be good for you. and I said, no, that can't be true. The power levels are too low. There's no way there is any form of danger whatsoever been using your laptop on your lap. But then I said to myself, well, let me take a quick look just in case. So I went and did some research on the research side of science. And I was sort of quite surprised. So there was already evidence in the research community that after about 3 or 4 hours, 25% of the male sperm is immobile.
Wow.
And I said, well, wow. And so I said to my sons, well, let's go find some protection for you. And I couldn't find any that was legitimate. There are many claims out there about how there is protection, but so many of them are not based on science, at least the science I understand. So I just built them some, and they were protected when they were using the devices I built them in. And then a couple of years later, I was getting really frustrated because it seemed like the mass market didn't know anything about it. Yet research knew tons about it. Mm-hmm. And somehow that research wasn't getting to the people who are using devices that today is so prevalent in our lives. So I wrote a book about it. And I said, look, this is what we know. And this is what it is. This is what we know. And this is what you can do about it. And I was hopeful people would have a better sense based on Radiation Nation, what it is that you may want to worry about and what is that you don't want to worry about. This is certainly not something we need to seriously worry about if you understand the environment you live in. So that's what prompted me to write a book.
It's huge. And I get books all the time, and I read your book, and it was just like I was telling you earlier, it was so clear and easy to understand. And yes, you have the science, but it's in a way that's completely digestible. And it's like, okay, I have these action plans. But to kind of take us back for the woman listening who's never even heard of EMF, which there are people out there.
Right.
What is it in its simplest terms?
Okay. When they invented electronics to the home with a cable that turns on your light bulb, that was the beginning of electromagnetic radiation. The wires in your wall, in your house, they generate extremely low frequency emissions at 60 cycles or 60 hertz. So there was already in our environment emissions that were being created that filled the room. But it wasn't the kind of stuff that really was that drastic because it was in a wall. And when you walked, you had to be really, really close to the wall for it to bother you. The other emissions, which is the radio frequency emissions, the electromagnetic radiation, is from laptops, cell phones, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, all the stuff coming out of the devices that are really, really close to us today. And because they're so close, they're more of a concern than the wires in the wall. And that's RF. So what is RF? It's a transmission that's being emanating out of you. Let's talk about your cell phone. It emanates out of the cell phone. It starts as a little ball and goes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it hits the cell tower 4 or 5 miles away. So it's omnidirectional. It's in all directions. So it's filling your room entirely before it ever gets to the cell tower. Once it gets there, then you communicate. So here you have one transmitter transmitting, and you have a whole bunch of others around you that are also transmitting, doing the same thing. So radio frequency signals are, well, let's talk about a microwave. When you have a piece of meat and you put it in your microwave oven, which I don't have, by the way, you put it in a microwave oven and you close the door and you push the button and it starts heating up the meat. What it's doing is it's heating up the water between the cells. Mm-hmm. They oscillate the cells. the meat heats up and cooks. Voila, you have cooked meat. Well, RF signals are microwave signals. They're much less power levels, but they're virtually a thermal emitting transmission. So the stuff that's around us 10 years ago when people had cell phones, not a big deal, but because none of us had it.
Right.
But today, your 6-year-old child's walking around with a cell phone. So all of a sudden, it's becoming pretty serious in our lives.
Wow, that's incredible. And I think, especially with the 5G that's coming into a lot of cities, Atlanta's a big hub for 5G. A lot of people are fighting it. But then you have like the majority of the demographic who doesn't know anything about it, who doesn't care about it. How do you get people to care and to at least understand, like what you just said to me makes perfect sense,
Right.
So what's the next step? What's the solution?
So I personally, there's many people in the electromagnetic radiation space that are lobbying the federal government. Dr. Deborah Davis, there's many, Dr. Powell. There's a lot of people that are trying to change legislation, the control of these technologies in our environment. Be honest with you, I think that's a tough path. And in the meantime, a lot of people may get hurt, maybe seriously hurt, and certainly you're debilitated at some level in your daily environment. So rather than take that path, I think it's like fairly important for us to share our understanding and knowledge to help people understand so they can make good choices. And as I was talking to you before, people just didn't know it existed. Yeah. And our goal is to try to help. And why is that important? Because there can be immediate benefit to the users of these technologies. And it's simple things you worry about, and it's simple things to fix in your environment, and you're fairly safe. And you're right, 5G, for those who don't know what 5G is, it's the 5th generation of technology used for mobile communications. So there's been 1 to 4, and 1 to 4G were, when it went to 2G to 4G, were digital signals being traveling with those carrier connections we talked about before. And those digital signals are like little jackhammers on the cell. So when you put a cell phone directly against your head, there's little jackhammers hitting his head. The standard, by the way, is your head can't heat up more than 2 degrees. That's what the standard says. That's 1.6 watts per kilogram. It can't heat up 2 degrees. The standard was created in 96 or so, and it was about, they modeled a 6-foot male that was in the Army. And 6-foot males are thick-headed, as you know.
How did you know?
I've heard it. I've heard the women tell me, oh, it's true. But it represented 3% of the marketplace.
Right.
When you use a cell phone, it probably enters your brain, enters your cranium probably by 3 inches or so. A 6-foot male is 2 inches and heats up by 2 degrees. Yours is going at least 3 inches into your head. Your child at 6 years old, it goes completely through their head. Mm-hmm. And, we were talking a little bit about the thermal heat and what it is. But do you know the thousands and thousands of research studies are not about the thermal heat up. It's the biological heat up, the biological impact. It's the influence to the neurological, the physiological that you worry about when you have a cell phone against your head. And if you think about it, your child it's going completely through the head. When I grew up, there was no such thing as cell phones. We used string and little cans. Today, every kid is walking around with it. And so they're being exposed at the various young of ages. And for me, it's only the latter part of my life. For them, it's their entire life.
Right. So what is the biological impact? I mean, is it cancer? Is it thinking issues?
So let's talk a little bit about that. It's a huge debate, Liz. There's a lot of controversy. Federal government says there's no problems. The scientific community that's not sponsored by the telecom industry, they all say it's a problem. And that was a debate that went on for years and years and years. A few years ago, the National Toxicity Program, which is a division of the federal government, actually spent $30,000, and they said, let's do an epidemiology study and prove that there is no biological impact. And I looked at the study when they did it, and I realized these guys were really, really good at what they were doing. They actually took the thermal impact away by moving the transmitters away from the subjects. And long story short, they found statistically significant increases in frontal lobe brain cancer.
Oh, wow.
Statistically significant heart cancer. So for the first time, we now had statistically significant data. What do I mean by statistically significant? There's been this debate, right? Mm-hmm. And the best way to eliminate that debate is have a statistically significant study. In other words, let's take 10,000 children, lock them in a room, radiate them, and see who dies. So we're not going to do that. So we're going to do this NTP study. That was reinforced by Ramazani Institute study, which happened a year or two ago. They statistically significant, came up with the identical data. So we know it can be very serious and it can cause cancer under certain conditions. But believe it or not, Liz, I'm not so worried about the cancer. I'm really more worried about the influence to the body. Because this is so new in our environment, our bodies are trying to figure out what to do with it. And so when I mentioned, I'll give you a little litany of tendonitis. When you hear ringing in your ears, there's studies that directly correlate tendonitis to the ambient increase of EMF in your room. Insomnia, burning sensation, allergy symptoms, eye strain, eye hurt, memory fogginess. All those are directly correlated symptoms we know about in research. But as I mentioned when I started, it's the neurological that I'm worried about most. Because when you have a cell phone directly to your head and you're 6 years old, it's going right through your frontal lobe.
Right.
And there is where, like ADHD, autism, Alzheimer's, all of these kinds of illnesses that are exponentially growing in our environment, there's been not statistically significant studies that directly link it. It's not statistical because they haven't taken 10,000 autistic children and proven that it's true. But there's studies that clearly show a direct causal effect. So for moms who worry about their children, I think it's pretty serious. I really do think you should be cautious about giving your children tablets and keeping them happy by playing games on it while they're having Wi-Fi transmitted from the tablet directly hitting their head.
Yeah. And this is huge right now because all of the kids are home due to the coronavirus. All the moms are home. Everyone's got a laptop. Everyone's working.
Right. Yeah.
Kids are doing schoolwork. So you mentioned some simple solutions to this problem, to this issue. What are they? What can we as moms do without going crazy, stuck in a house with our kids?
So if you're going to have your kids use the devices, if you can connect it directly through a wire, an Ethernet wire from your laptop to the Wi-Fi router, you eliminate that transmission coming out of the tablet. I have a laptop that I use. It's 4 foot away from me. And then I have it's connected with Ethernet. and I have that connected to a terminal. So I've eliminated all those transmissions, and all the electronics I just keep away. Very, very simple to do. With Wi-Fi, I'm not going to throw my tablet away. I use it, but I use it in short-term periods, not long-term. So duration of use also is sort of somewhat important. If you're using a cell phone to your head, and you use it for 3 minutes, you don't have to worry about anything. It's not going to impact your body. But if you use it for 2 hours a day, 10 years, you're 3 times more likely to have frontal lobe cancer.
Wow.
So it's the time duration you use it is very important. And then, of course, distance. So, when you have a cell phone to your head, it's like 100% of penetration. So it's potentially the worst condition you may have. If you take it 1 or 2 foot away, 80% or more of the danger is gone.
Wow.
If you put it 4 foot away, 98% is gone. So distance is your friend. Just simply putting this stuff away from you minimizes your dangers. If you have a cell phone, your cell phone transmits Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and the cell tower connection. That's 3 transmitters. Are you using 3 transmitters? Like if you're like me, no. You're using just the cell tower connection. And so I turn them off. I just don't have. In other words, one of the best things you can do is turn off all the bees in the room. One bee won't kill you, 1,000 will. So what you want to do is try to go around and think about all the spaces that are transmitters that you don't necessarily need. You just turn them off. When you put cabling to the equipment, you reduce the emissions into the room, the bees in the room. By doing those simple things, believe it or not, you really do change. Those precautionary measures really does change fundamentally how you're being impacted and your family being impacted.
What are your thoughts on AirPods?
Okay, so the standard is 1.6 watts per kilogram for a cell phone. And that is penetrating your head by 3 inches. If you were concussed, if you had a concussion, or you were using it a lot, your immune system is suppressed, and it breaks down the blood-brain barrier, which is protecting your frontal lobe cells. So when you use these kinds of devices in your ear, they talk to each other. Guess what? It's through your head they're talking. And they're using 0.3 watts, which is, 3 times less power, 5 times less power, right? And so is that good? Well, we know through research that 0.1 watts, 15 times less the power level of a 1.6 watts per kilogram cell phone, can mutate the frontal lobe cell. So to answer your question, I do not like them.
Yeah.
I particularly don't like them for kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, right. They're dangerous.
I asked the question because you see people walking around, like they have them in all day, just in case the phone rings. It was like the old Bluetooth ones.
Right.
And I'm just, in my own motherly intuition, it's like, that can't be good.
You're right. Absolutely. And women putting their cell phone in a bra. There's clear research that shows direct links to breast cancers as a result of that constant pressure. This is another, in my opinion, a very important point that I'm about to make. When you're a teenage girl and you take a cell phone and you put it in your back pocket, your womb is that close. you are transmitting into the cell of the womb. You are transmitting into the eggs of the womb. That potentially can mutate that cell in the womb. She will have 10 years later a child that actually is porting that the cell, the damaged cell, to the next generation. So you can have subtending generations actually changing as a result of exposures. It's pretty serious because we know that autism starts potentially in the womb. We know there was a guy in San Francisco, a researcher in San Francisco, who gave a bunch of women that were in their first trimester RF meters. And they said, go walk around and let's see what happens. He was looking for impacts to the womb in the first trimester. What he found was women that were exposed to higher levels of RF were 3 times more likely to have miscarriage.
Wow.
So it's serious stuff when you have these devices near you. And there are consequences. Probably for you and me, we're going to be okay, but some of us won't be.
Yeah.
We really need to be careful, in my opinion.
I mean, I'm one of those women that has the phone like in my side pocket, all the time. I know. And it's just.
No, it's like crazy.
Yeah.
It's like practical stuff. You take it out of your pocket, you're perfectly safe.
Okay.
Putting in, you're potentially increasing the dangers to your own body and subtending children. I had when I wrote the Radiation Nation, there was a Dr. Prasad. He's one of the most brilliant men I've ever met. And he was an X-ray guy. He was like the first X-ray guy in the U.S. And I told him that there's potential influence to the womb. And he said, nah, you don't know. Now, here's a brilliant man, been doing this for 50 years.
And now a quick break with a word from our sponsor. Look, if everything that's been going on in the world has you feeling a little more tense and anxious lately, and let's be real, you are not alone in this, you're going to want to head over to motherhoodunstressed.com and click the shop tab to stock up on my line of organic USA-grown hemp. I'm telling you, consistent dosing of CBD is going to take away that stress. It's going to take away that anxiety and have you feeling more chill and at peace. The key is to take it consistently here. So use the code Buckhead to stock up now and start feeling less stressed today.
Then, like 2 years later, he calls me up and he says, I had a young woman, a high-tech young lady, come in. She had a child that passed away immediately. And there were fundamental mutated genes, very rare. And it was a combination of multiple. When you have multiple, the probability of multiple is 0. So he said, then I started to think about what you said. That location closest to the womb in the back pocket, in this case, he thought could have been the source.
Wow.
We'll never know, right? But it could be. And so what he did with her, he said, get the phone away from you. Get these technologies away from you. Clean up your environment. And let's see what happens. A couple of years later, she had a bouncing baby boy. So it's potentially influential. So there are the cancer-like stuff maybe. But, when you're reading at night, you have your tablet and you're looking at it, and there's another electromagnetic radiation. It's what's referred to as visible light. All the colors of the rainbow you see are electromagnetic radiation. And when you're in bed at night and you're looking at a tablet, that's emitting a high concentration LED of blue light. The blue light is interrupting your melatonin. So where you used to walk around and go to bed at night and go right to sleep, the reason you did was because the cryptochrome in the back of the eye, the little switch said, oh, it's nighttime. Let me turn that switch on, and that's going to start the melatonin. And when you have an LED in front of you 2 hours before you go to bed, you are disrupting that switch.
Right.
So you put it aside and you try to go to sleep and you can't. Well, the reason why is because the switch didn't go on. Very simple things like recognizing your circadian rhythm is being adjusted because of what the electromagnetic radiation is doing in your environment. In fact, never have a cell phone next to a night table.
Oh no!
Never ever do that. I was talking with a really really wonderful lady at a podcast, and I was telling you, this bedroom is a sanctuary. You cannot have any device transmitting because it interferes with the body systems. There's like 4,000 systems that it interferes with.
Right.
And she was very nice and was telling me oh yes, very good. Thank you so much for the information. She didn't believe a word I said. And 2 weeks later, she calls me up and she said, my husband and I are sleeping. We took the phones away.
Wow.
And I said, will you please come talk to us again? It's really true. It doesn't take much to influence our bodies. So.
Yeah. And I feel like too, with our routines, how life is now, we're just inundated, the cell phone is almost a part of our bodies.
Oh, yeah.
It's everything. It's our connection to social. It's our connection to our own identity. So to make these shifts, I think for a lot of people would seem, huge.
Right.
But I mean, the benefits clearly outweigh the...
And believe it or not, it's not substantial.
Right.
Moving it from 1 foot to 4 foot away from you is no big deal. And yet you change the fundamental impact to your body by that simple change.
God, that's amazing. And it seems like the change is fairly quick, when you make the improvements, your body wants to heal. It wants to get back to homeostasis. And then when you give it that chance, you can get there.
Yeah. Oh, there's no question about it. When you're the architect of your own environment. If you want to make sure that chemicals that you're using won't be harming your children, volatile organic compounds being generated in your house, which happens, you just put a cap on it. Mm-hmm. So you take an action to take that volatile chemical gas and you eliminate it in your house. Well, this is the same thing. It's really fairly straightforward to clean up your space fairly readily, and it really does have an impact to you and your family.
Right. Now, in your book, you talk about the big five. Would you mind touching on those a little bit if we haven't already covered those?
I think we actually covered almost all of them.
Good.
The only thing we haven't done is talked about shielding. You can actually, which I did for my boys. I actually shielded the signal so it couldn't get past and hit their groin. So there is the shielding, which we hadn't talked about. And there are shielding for personal devices like this that are available in the marketplace that you may want to consider. Why? Because, Liz, you're going to use a cell phone.
Right.
And if you're going to use it, eliminating that potential is maybe a good strategy.
Well, talk to us about DefenderShield, because you have this amazing book out. You also have an assortment of products that are going to protect people. Like you said, you're not going to get rid of your cell phone. You're not going to get rid of your tablet, but there are things you can do. Talk to us about your company.
Yeah, I actually, believe it or not, I sort of decided several years ago, we're not going to be victims about this. And I don't think I'm going to throw my cell phone away. Oh, which, by the way, I never had near me. I always were very, very cautious using it. But today, I don't have any problem using it because I have a shield that actually eliminates the signal from hitting my frontal lobe. But it really started from the Defender pad I built for my sons, which, by the way, I don't have grandchildren yet. It didn't work. It just didn't work.
I'm sure it's more complicated than that.
I suspect it is, Liz. And so I just took that technology I created for them, and I created it for cell phones. And believe it or not, there was an anecdotal story. There was a 16-year-old girl who had gotten a cell phone. Her parents said she was in perfect good shape. She was good health, ate well, a peak of at 16 years old. They got her a cell phone. At her insistence, a year later, she had frontal lobe cancer and passed away.
Oh, my goodness.
When I heard that, I got really upset because I knew all we needed to do was shield her and she would have been fine. So that prompted me to create other products using the similar technologies. And I have laptop, tablet, portable PCs, glasses. We were talking about Bluetooth. I have a series of glasses so you can protect yourself. If you want to read your tablet at night, using my glasses, you actually eliminate the blue component from going past. And so the melatonin's being created and you're still having an opportunity to read your tablet, which I don't think you need to, but if you do, that now have protection.
You now have an option.
You now have an option, right? Exactly. And earbuds. We talked about things to do. Don't put a cell phone to your head if you can avoid it. If you use it on speaker, that's far better than putting it close to your head. But in between there, you can use earbuds. Earbuds are pretty safe. The kind you're using is pretty safe, for example.
Right, with the wire.
Yeah. But I eliminated the wire on my earbuds.
Very cool.
Yeah, I converted to acoustical links down low where it's not damaging anything, and there's no emissions to the tip of the head. And they're pretty high fidelity. They're really high quality hearing because I like high quality hearing. So, and we have blankets. Believe it or not, we have blankets that I actually created for pregnant women. So that they could actually protect the womb throughout their pregnancy. But what's happened is there are clinics now using my blanket because electrohypersensitive people, like multiple chemically sensitive people, 20% of the population's electric hypersensitive. In other words, when they take a cell phone and they feel tingling, burning, it's a pretty serious thing. Of that 20%, by the way, 80% are women. Yeah. I do not know why. No one knows why women are more susceptible.
Women's intuition. Women are more sensitive in everything.
Something like that, for sure. And I know you know what I'm going to say next because you're so that intuitive. but it's really true that women are more impacted. And so clinics have started to pick up a blanket and it shields them from the ambient in their environments. And so that's become an important product for many, particularly hypersensitive. So we created all these products and we continue to create products because we're not going to get rid of our tablets. We're not going to get rid of our cell phones.
Right.
And putting it aside is not enough.
Right.
You want to use them, and when you get them close to your body, you want to try to find as much protection. If time and distance doesn't work, there's shielding. So that's what DefenderShield is.
I just love that you saw a problem. You saw that there was this miscommunication between the research and the market, and you're like, well, you know what? I'm going to do something about this. Like, that's incredible. I love it when I meet someone like that.
Yeah. And believe it or not, I'm getting clinics involved now.
Good.
I speak publicly quite often about this problem. And there are clinics now that read my book and have converted to electric hypersensitive clinics.
Good.
Now that they know what they're looking for. And it's wonderful because I was getting these phone calls from people and they would say, I'm having problems. I'm not feeling right. And I could only help them so much.
Right.
The medical community have to step up, and they weren't stepping up. It wasn't recognized as a problem. But now it's beginning to be a problem. and the neurological stuff is, I'm working with Dr. Porter. He has a brain tap. One of the things we found was that people are walking and their brain cycle is sleeping, or vice versa. So their body was never healing.
Wow.
That was how disruptive the ambient was, the RF was in their environments. And brain tap actually changes that pattern over time and puts it back into the right cycle. So when you sleep, right. And you re-nourish your body in that sleep cycle, which you have to have or you never get re-nourished.
That's incredible. I had no idea. I need to do more of your research and what you're doing in the world.
Yeah. But I actually now drag one of the doctors with me when I do the presentation, because he's got to tell people. He had a guy come into his practice, and he was in a wheelchair. He was an electrician working in a highly concentrated exposure environment.
Sure.
He couldn't even walk, and it was largely electromagnetic radiation that he had in his environment. That's how debilitating it was for him. So, and believe it or not, unfortunately, he's not unique. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's not the only instance of that kind of worsened condition. And there was clear clinic observation that was environmental, and the dominant environmental problem was electromagnetic radiation. And he found a way of fixing that with brain tap, with Dr. Porter's brain tap, and so many other protocols. But he's 9 months later, a very healthy 42-year-old man.
Wow. I didn't think you were going to say that. I thought, once it was done, it was done.
No. And Liz, people were calling me. If you had told me 3 years ago that you were hypersensitive, every time you touched this keyboard, your fingers tingled, I would say stop, because it's going to get worse before it gets better. Because that was what I was watching in the marketplace. Right. But no, I've found that there is ways of trying to help. And Dr. Court is the physician that's doing that. He works with a brilliant biochemist, Jonette. And it's that combination that are trying to figure out what's the impact to the body. Mm-hmm. What are physical things going on that have to be adjusted and changed? And It's that combination that's been able to break that ice for all of us, actually.
Well, I hope that their message and your message gets to Washington, and they hear it and they do what they need to do in conjunction with all of these companies out there who are putting out all of this technology. I mean, it's for our own health and wellness of this entire country, of the entire world.
It really is, because it does. 100 years from now, the body will have figured out how to deal with it. It won't become a problem, but it's only very recently, because it's only been in our environment in a heavy way over the last 5-10 years.
Wow.
Think about it like when I was 12 years old, which was quite a number of years ago, I used to smoke cigarettes. I was a real man. And do you know, at that time in the 60s, early 60s, like that, there was known in science a direct correlation with cigarette smoking and cancer. But the general population didn't know it.
Right.
That's literally, in my opinion, a similar model of what's going on here. It's been around for a long time. Science is saying it's a problem. The society is not necessarily agreeing, but pretty soon it's going to become more apparent based on experience. I want to tell another little story. The World Health Organization categorizes RF as a 2B carcinogenic. 2B means it's potentially a carcinogenic. So if you're a parent and you want to go to the classroom and the teacher's in front telling you about what they're going to be doing in the class, And in one corner, you have a welder, and all these fumes are coming out from the welder. On the other corner, you have a 55-gallon drum being filled up with gasoline, and all the gas is coming off. And then in the back, you have a Wi-Fi. Guess what? All three of them are 2B carcinogenics. Yet, you would bitch and moan about the welder, yet the Wi-Fi is the equivalent.
Right.
So these are in our environment, and some organizations are evolving to understanding its impact, and they're going to take some time to do it. So if you want to make sure you're protected, do it yourself.
Right, right. And that's what this show is really about, being empowered to protect yourself, to protect your family, educate yourself. Right. I mean, the knowledge is out there. You just need to get it. And when you do that, you're no longer a victim, as you said.
Yeah, you're no longer. And you're pretty safe, honestly. If you sort of know your environment and take actions to minimize the use of laptops in a 6-year-old child's lap. When you have a stroller, you don't put your cell phone in the back of the stroller right in front of the head of the child.
Right. Simple
Things like that. Just being aware of the transmitters and what you can do to minimize those exposures is just it's very important.
It's life-changing for your children and then your grandchildren. Absolutely.
There's no question about it. I tell you, I am, and I keep on saying, I am most worried about the impact of kids. Mm-hmm. Because you're talking about 8 hours a day in a classroom. They're all having a transmitter, a B. You have 50, 60 Bs in a room. Mm-hmm. And then you have the Wi-Fi's. You have all these smart stuff around you for 6-7 hours. Mm-hmm. In fact, I'll go back to a cell phone is 1.6 watts per kilogram, right? I also said that if you're concussed, 0.1 watts. Classroom that was typically less than 0.1, like 0.05 emissions, is now 0.5. That's 1/3 of a cell phone for 7 hours a day.
Wow.
There's going to be, in my opinion, neurological and physiological impacts. And of course, that correlates with what we see with behavior with kids. Sure. And I think that could be one of the sources.
I think you're right. I think this conversation now, being on the record now, people are going to look back in 10 years and be like, God, how are we so wrong? How are we so off? The information was out there.
Stupid. Yeah, exactly, Liz. How stupid were we? We just didn't realize.
Well, I am honored to have you on the show, to be sharing this message with as many people as possible. Where can our listener find you online, find DefenderShield products, all of that?
So DefenderShield.com is our website. And what you can find there is a learning section that tells you what 5G is. It breaks it down so it's not a mystery. Along with all the research that's sort of important in our modern times to understand. So I have a section just so you learn a little bit about it. We also sell a book, Radiation Nation, on that. So if you really are not compelled to consider product protection, then you can learn a lot. Yeah. Just simply by going available. And by the way, I often point out, you don't need any of my products if you're watching your environment, because you can be cautious, and that caution will be more than adequate to protect you. So you don't have to buy this stuff.
Right. But as you said before, no one's going to be tossing out their cell phone. They want to look at their iPad or their phone.
Exactly. I don't. I know what I do. Right. You have to protect, because I knew what I was going to throw it out. It's wireline was my only telephone service, and I never understood why a cell phone would be primary for kids until I got older and didn't need my wireline anymore. My main number is my cell phone. Right. All of us are using our cell phones. It's the way we communicate.
Right. So with that new world, we need to adjust as well. We need to adapt.
Yeah. You just have to figure it out.
Wow, this was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on, Daniel. Thank you for sharing your light, your knowledge, your expertise. Thank you for being a change maker in the world, literally.
Liz, thanks so much. I appreciate that comment, but you as well, changing the world as well, because you're guiding others that are similar in the space you were in, which I think is so important. So congratulations for the work you do as well.
Oh, thank you. You have been listening to the Motherhood Unstressed podcast, and I'm your host, Liz Carlile. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you love this episode, please share it with at least one friend. Tag us on your Instagram stories. That's a great way to support the show. Make sure that you're subscribed so that you never miss out on a morning meditation or on an interview with an incredible person doing incredible work in the world. And if you haven't already, please hit those 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, because it really does boost the show's rating and it gets the message out to more and more listeners. So thank you.